Welcome to part 2 of our European Union trademark series. Last time we jetted off to France for some basic background knowledge. In this video, we're going to talk about the EUIPO registration process from start to finish. This time we will row you through and under the canals and bridges of filing, examination, publication, and registration. Let's get started. First things first, how will you choose to navigate the process? Slow and steady on foot, crossing each bridge as you come to it, or by boat, weaving swiftly between and below the obstacles? The European Union Intellectual Property Office has two options when it comes to registration. You can use the standard procedure, which takes 4 to 9 months barring any delay, or you can fast-track your application. Let's start with the standard procedure and lay out the groundwork, or, if you rather, the waterwork. The first bridge to cross, formalization. There's paperwork to be done. First off, the EUIPO does not require you to conduct a trademark search. However, as always, this step is strongly advisable to reduce the risk of your application being rejected. And there is no reason not to conduct a search. The electronic process is completely free. You can do it yourself or have a lawyer or trademark agency do it for you. So, what information needs to be included in your application? If you are not using an EUIPO form, you need to include a request for registration. You will need to include your identifying information such as your name, address, nationality, etc. You will need a representation of the trademark, and you will need a list of goods and services by international class. And if you are not filing electronically, you will need your and your representative's signature. Like other trademark authorities, the EUIPO uses the NICE classification system for goods and services. Additionally, when describing your goods and services, the EUIPO follows the harmonized database for accepted terms. You can see which goods and services fit into which classes by using TM class. When it comes to representing your mark, there are a few things you should know. An EU trademark can be represented in any appropriate form using generally available technology so long as it can be reproduced on the register in a clear, precise, self-contained, easily accessible, intelligible, durable, and objective manner. For color and color combinations, the color should be indicated by a Pantone color system reference number. You need to make sure you give a very detailed description of the color arrangement. For shapes, a graphic representation must be provided with multiple views, and this can either be a photograph or a computer-generated image. For sounds, an audio file must be provided. For non-word marks, the mark type should be indicated. Include as much information as possible, as this can only help the examiners determine the protections for your mark. Here's some good news. If you have a nationally registered trademark, you can apply for priority rights within the EUIPO. The claim must include the date and the number and country of the previous application. Documentation in support of priority claims must be filed within 3 months of the filing date. On any journey, there is a toll or ferryman to pay. The same is true of trademark registration with the EUIPO. The price structure breaks down into basic filing, electronic filing, and filing classes of goods and services. Filing an individual mark by paper for a single class is $1,499 Canadian, while electronically it is reduced to $1,274 Canadian. The service costs for application are $75 Canadian, and each additional class is $225 Canadian regardless of application method. However, between the stages of publication and registration, there is no additional fee. Now, let's leave the uneven cobblestones and crowded piazzas and talk about fast-tracking. The advantage is obvious. You can get your trademark published in half the time by speeding up the examination stage. But before you commit yourself, you'd better have all of the information. First off, you'll have to make your application payment up front. You will also have to complete a 5-step application. To even qualify for fast tracking, you will need to meet a long list of conditions. Let's roll through them. You must be domestic to the EU or appoint a representative. The trademark cannot be a collective or certification mark, and you cannot request a trademark search for your application. Additionally, for priority claims, the documents must be attached to your application or made available for viewing. The trademark must be a word, figurative, shape, or sound mark, and all valid representations must be included. You cannot make color claims for figurative or shape marks. All terms for goods and services must be from the EUIPO approved database. Finally, if the language of the application is not one of the 5 accepted languages, you must accept a translation by the EUIPO. Payment can be made by any acceptable payment method, including a credit card. Specific instructions will be given for bank transfers. You cannot make payments through a third party. Therefore, while fast tracking is, well, faster, you may want to assess if this is the way you want to go. After all that hard work, we have reached our next bridge, examination. The EUIPO will examine your application for completeness and for anything that needs clarification, as well as any absolute grounds for refusal. Absolute grounds for refusal include a trademark that is functional, deceptive, or against the public order. As always, if the EUIPO finds an issue in your filing, they will make an objection. You have to respond to their objection within 2 months or risk having your trademark rejected. Once the examination is over, you'll be punted to the next bridge, publication. Domestic applicants have their trademarks published for 3 months, while foreign applicants are published for 4 months. During this time, any third party who feels threatened by your trademark on relative grounds may file an opposition. Relative grounds for refusal include earlier marks that are similar or identical in likeness. 1 in 5 EU trademarks get opposed at this stage, so you need to be prepared. It usually takes about a year from when the opposition was filed for a first instance decision to be made. Both parties have the right to appeal at this time. One thing to keep in mind is that even when an opposition against you is successful, it is possible that the same conflicts will not exist if you decide to switch to a national registration within any of the individual countries of the EU, so a negative EUIPO ruling is not necessarily the end of the road. After negotiating the traffic jam that is publication, you will reach the final bridge, registration. The EUIPO does not issue paper registration certificates unless you request one. Once you are registered, you must renew your trademark every 10 years. Be careful to use your trademark consistently and remember to renew, as you can always be subject to cancellation, revocation, or invalidation. Bene, there you have it, the start-to-finish guide to EUIPO trademark registration. As always, feel free to contact us if you have any questions. Next time, we'll be leaving the narrow alleys and bustling canals of Venice to the ancient lands of Greece to talk about protecting your trademark from chimeras. Copycats. Until then,